My name's Stephen. I am the Chief Business Development Officer here at Boiler Room. What is the base knowledge of Boiler Room in this room before we start? Maybe who's watched the Boiler Room show? That's a good start. Who's been to a Boiler Room show? Good sir as well. And wait, is everyone from London here or everyone's from all around the country? Let's just have some which shows have people been to?
Artwork.
Artwork, fantastic. What about anyone else? DJ EZ! Jesus, he's one of my greatest DJs. I've never heard somebody play so many garage songs in such a short amount of time. He's just an absolute G. We actually did the 24-hour broadcast with him, raising money for breast cancer awareness charity. I didn't know how he was going to play for longer than 2 hours, because he just plays so many songs in one short amount of time. Okay, Artwork, DJ EZ. Anyway, has anyone been to like a non-DJ show that we do?
Was it Jamie Woon?
JB Woon, yeah, over in Hackney. Okay, so look, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I've only got like 15-20 minutes. I'm going to tell you a little bit about me, which feels weird, but why not? And then sort of my route into the industry, and a little bit about Boiler Room, and actually going to show you some of the slides that we present to brand partners when we're pitching to work with them. Just I think it's good for you to just see the actual stuff and the assets that we use when we're talking to them. And then I'm going to hand over, we've got a full fun day packed. Matt's going to be up next, talking about the music team. We're sort of going to work everybody through the different departments we have here at Boiler Room. So I think starting with the music team, going through the marketing team who promote all of our shows and maximise awareness on them, to event production, through to live broadcast production, the core of our business, through to post-production. Because we don't just do live broadcasts, we shoot other sorts of videos as well, which we'll come on to throughout the day. A little bit about me. There's my embarrassing cheesy press shot from my LinkedIn. LinkedIn, by the way, is the #1. It's your golden rule. If this whole day is about sort of getting into the music industry, LinkedIn is just absolutely sacrosanct. I've got a hell of a lot of followers, but I'm also quite old and heading towards my mid-30s. But so my role, the Chief Business Development Officer here at Boiler Room. Before that, honestly, I went to University of Sussex. I did a media studies degree. I was the first person in my family to go to university, and my mum was very proud. I think it just goes, and now I'm sort of here 10 years later as one of 3 people running this company. So I think, as we're going to come on to it in the panel discussion this afternoon, but I just think by doing lots of networking and working incredibly hard and just being personal and being sincere and just finding it difficult to not swear, I swear quite naturally. Just really caring, really giving a care about what you do is the most important thing to take away from the day. But so I started out at a media agency called Owned International. How I got that job was by applying through the job listings section of the Guardian newspaper back when there was enough jobs that people could actually apply through newspapers. They really like that nowadays. That's why hopefully what we're going to get out of today is just understanding the different sort of roles that exist within the music industry and ways of sort of getting in and capitalising on those opportunities. Then I went to a company called Vice. Anyone heard of Vice? Online, well, when I started there it was really just a magazine in Shoreditch, but now it's like a big online news organisation. And then come to Boiler Room. I've been at Boiler Room for nearly 4 years. Boiler Room's been around for about 5 years. It was founded by a very tall fellow you might see at some point today called Blaze. He's literally like 6'7", it's like talking to a tree. But I remember Boiler Room was going on for about a year, and it was doing pretty well. It was getting a lot of press interest. They had a big article in Time Out. And I guess I'd had some experience in my career at Vice of sort of helping businesses transition from being something a bit like small and kind of weird and chaotic to being something a bit more serious and sort of grown up and far-reaching. So he was calling me about this Boiler Room thing. Initially I was like, what? Bunch of people in a room, like streaming over the internet. No, but I'm not interested in that. But he's a very persistent man, and he's built a fantastic company here. So I came on board, and I guess my role splits into 2 parts. So one is together with Blaze and a guy called Mazak, who's our chief ops. So Blaze is the CEO and founder. My role is the Chief Business Development Officer crudely. It's to sort of, running the company with those 3 guys from a general point of view, thinking about staffing and what directions the company's going to take. Then specifically, my role is to keep the lights on through partnerships like this, and working with brands to do new stuff and create new experiences that are additive to the experience of music fans. So, Boiler Room, here's some kind things that The Guardian said about us. The reason we started Boiler Room was out of frustration. This was the original, you can't see it very well. Can we turn the lights down maybe slightly, is that going to work? This is the original Boiler Room in Hackney Downs. We started Boiler Room out of frustration. Here you go, so you can see you've got one of our hosts, Bradley, there's another guy called Tristan, and they're here, you've got the performer playing, you've got our visual projections in the background, you've got the crowd surrounding the DJs and performers, no barrier, wanting to get everyone up close and personal and have none of the sort of the artificial barriers between artist and crowd. We've got somebody filming it right here. But the reason we started Boiler Room was out of frustration. I'm old enough to remember when Top of the Pops was like exciting, when it was legit. Anyone remember Top of the Pops? On a Friday night when you'd have like Blur and Oasis and all these fantastic bands on it. And you'd get home, you'd race home to go and watch Top of the Pops. And also when MTV was like a thing, when it was legit, spending summer holidays just sitting indoors because it wasn't sunny outside, watching MTV Base. But then you had like the democratization of music, or whatever you want to call it, where people started downloading music for free online. Completely decimated the recording industry. What it meant is that people just weren't paying for music any longer. So how record labels reacted was by focusing on a limited number of bankable stars, people who they knew they could sort of recoup their money on. What that meant is there just wasn't enough sort of talent coming through and being developed. So the big sort of traditional platforms through which people would learn about and consume new music, again, being risk averse, had to change tact. So Top of the Pops just kind of died because there wasn't enough stuff coming through. And MTV became a reality TV platform instead, so there wasn't enough music for them to play. What this meant is we were sort of like working in music, had friends working in music, but there was they were hitting a glass ceiling in terms of how big they could get. There was no platforms through which alternative, experimental, emerging artists could reach a mass audience. So what we did is we took over this dusty, asbestos-filled boiler room of a 1930s warehouse in Hackney Down. We gaffer taped a GoPro camera to the warehouse wall, connected to a Ustream account, back when Ustream was like the hot new thing, connected to a MacBook, not even a MacBook Pro, just a MacBook. Got some DJs and performers round, had a couple of beers, and just switched it on. And I think our mission, we were finding our feet at first and seeing what we could do, and just giving a platform, giving exposure in the most immediate DIY way that we could to the artists that we thought would deserve a bit of attention. And then our sort of MO formed. We realised we were getting a buzz about it. Time Out wrote an article about Boiler Room about 6 months in. It was interesting that Time Out, and press and publicity is obviously a fantastic thing, but the article in Time Out kind of positioned us as the future of nightclubbing, which is pointedly not true. Like, nightclubbing is great, I don't really go nightclubbing so much anymore, but nightclubbing is still fun. But we sort of took all of our cues from pirate radio. Does everyone know what pirate radio is? It's took a lot of Deja Vu and all the stuff now, frankly, illegal radio stations in London where, mostly in London, where there was no, because they're illegal, there was no commercial imperative for them to play hit records, because they weren't beholden to anybody, so they could just play whatever tunes they wanted. And so that was where you heard all the best fun new music, and it had a community feel as well, because people would text or call in and be like, hey, it's Dave from Hackney or whatever. You just felt like it was a real engaged sort of community versus more mainstream media. And so taking that as our cue, our mission is Boiler Room as a this is a keyhole, I'm sorry, it's really cheesy, but it's a keyhole. Boiler Room being a keyhole through which online audiences can access real-world emerging music scenes and subcultures as they happen at their most exciting point. And that's because we had nimble, cost-efficient methods of production, because it was just initially that GoPro camera gaffer taped to the wall, we could record shows very cheaply, bearing in mind that, I don't know, shooting an episode of Top of the Pops probably cost 150, 200 grand. That's why they had to work with these big artists, and they could only schedule them once a run of however many shows, doing once a week. We could just take our cameras now and go anywhere and just set up and record whatever music scene we wanted. And so we've shot, Boiler Room went quite quickly from being a physical place, literally the Boiler Room that was in Hackney Downs, to being a mobile organisation. Boiler Room became more of an idea, as a concept. So we shot everywhere from rooftops in New York to the jungles in Tulum in Mexico to China quite recently. We've been all over the world with Boiler Room. Here's just a little 1 minute reel of the variety of content that we put out now. Oh, with no sound. You have to imagine.
You can do the voiceover.
You have to imagine this really fantastic pumping soundtrack going on underneath. Here's some stuff that we've shot in virtual reality.
Do you want me to sort the sound out after get this on if you want me to?
No, it's okay.
Cool.
his Fortet playing in London. This is us going and performing all internationally. That's Eats Everything in a Chip Shop. I don't really have any strategy there. He wanted to do it there, so we did it there. And we do a lot of classical music now. That's a key thing as well. Like, I think Boiler Room is most commonly associated with electronic music and with DJs performing. But we're completely genre agnostic. I think the main reason we're associated with electronic music is that when we started in London 5 years ago, electronic music just so happened to be the most exciting scene on our doorstep. So when we went to Germany, which was the second country where we set up a permanent office, techno was like just the most exciting scene that had been going on in Germany, so we focused on techno. When we went to Los Angeles, it was all about like the beat scene and sort of the more melodic hip hop. In New York, it's all about rap. So wherever we go to, we're led not by like any one sort of defining genre, but just by literally showcasing whatever is the most exciting scene that happens there. Where are we now? The MTV, we like to think we're the MTV of the digital generation. I don't know why we've got this bugbear about MTV, but I used to really love MTV and it really sold me out. Desperate housewife, wherever it was. But we are now the world's biggest underground music broadcaster. We do 30 broadcasts a month across a range of different genres, broadcasting from a lot of different countries, and we reach around 157 million people a month worldwide. How that audience splits out, this is a snapshot from 1 month, but it broadly stays sort of the same. UK is still the top, USA, Germany's very big. Germany and USA sort of nestle for number 2, but we're very spread across lots of different countries. And we're very diffuse across it, we're very spread out across different platforms. We've got our website, YouTube, Dailymotion, Facebook, all these different platforms, I think, which is just really reflective of the way that people consume music. Like, I think it's quite, there's a big thing within like the marketing, or just like the brand industry about 5-10 years ago, where everyone wanted to, well, like the agenda was to navigate people towards their own platform, just so they could like have the conversation there and like just come to my platform. A, I think it's quite arrogant, and B, like, it's just not reflective of the way that people consume media. I know if I would, like, we just want to be on whatever is the platform that's best for consuming the type of content that we're doing, that's where we're going to be, right? If you're going to listen to mixes, you go to SoundCloud, therefore we're on SoundCloud. If you want to do some social stuff, go to Facebook, it just stands to reason. So we're very spread out across those different platforms. Facebook was a real game changer for us. Our audience, whenever, like, maybe at this time last year, was around half of that. But Facebook, like with Facebook Live, has just completely had a transformative effect on our business, and is where we now get around 60% of our traffic on our live broadcast that we do. It's a huge, huge change. That's actually interesting. Where does, in this room, because by the way, this is a two-way thing, like we're doing this, we're incredibly, I didn't say this up front, but sincerely, this is something that we're very proud of doing. Like, you know, Boiler Room from the very beginning was like, we're an independent company, we don't have any sort of big like company backers, like it's just us in this room like trying to figure stuff out as we go along and calling in people for sort of their expert advice. But right from the beginning, how we're able to function is through partnerships with select brands. And our golden rule of thumb with any partnership we enter into is that it has to unlock something new for music fans that neither us or the brand partner could have achieved in isolation. For example, like with Ray-Ban, who were in our 4th year of partnership with them, we put on a festival for the first time. We don't have the resources or anything to put on a festival, but those guys had the intent and the desire to do it, so we put on a festival together with an alcohol partner that we work with. We started shooting documentaries for the first time. So any partnership we do has to unlock something new for music fans that we couldn't have achieved on our own, or nor could the brand partner. And with this thing, for example, like like you can look across the floor, this is us, these aren't ringers. Like I'd say the median age here, if you just discount me because I just skew it way up, the median age in this company is honestly about 22. And so, you know, the opportunity, and you know, everyone sort of got into the company randomly through different means. They were like promoting, and that's the other thing about like, if you're really into the music industry, I think a little bit of doing it yourself. Like a lot of people we recruited was via them, you know, having their own club nights, their own like very small DIY labels. Like we're a very collaborative organisation. We act like a lot of companies, when you sign up for them, you'll have to sign a load of restrictive covenants that say you can't do any freelance stuff, or you know, we own sort of your time and stuff. Absolutely not the case with us. Like it's much more attractive to us if somebody is like doing their own thing and it can evidence them like run club nights or whatever, then it's fantastic. what's the point of all of that? Oh yeah, but it's like this honestly is something we're very proud. So this partnership for us, from our point of view, selfishly, is just gives us a chance to work with young people again and hopefully try and like share some of the knowledge that we've got. But it's a two-way street as well. We want to know, we want to learn some stuff from you guys, right? You are the kind of the key demographic of our business. So, you know, any insights that we can get from you is going to be just as valuable for us. To wit, my original point, how does everyone mostly consume Boiler Room broadcasts? Who would be, let's say like YouTube, website or Facebook? We have a show of hands. So the primary source of consuming for live broadcasts. With whom would it be? YouTube. Okay. For the live broadcasts. What about the website? What about Facebook? See, that's actually really split. It's much more split than I thought. It's interesting. Okay, so that is the point. That is why we exist across a lot of different platforms. You know, people consume in different places. I think the difference with Boiler Room as well is that we are this weird kind of nebulous company that we have this office here, we do events, but at our heart we are an online broadcaster, I guess. But the difference with Boiler Room, like, you know, I love Spotify. Like, I've got Spotify Premium on my phone. It's where I listen to Justin Bieber on the low key and I don't tell anyone. But I think the difference with Boiler Room versus some of those other companies is that you'd perhaps be hard pressed to find somebody wearing a Deezer t-shirt or like identifying themselves as sort of a Deezer fan. I think the difference with Boiler Room is, you know, we're in the trenches, we're living it, and we have this sort of hope, you know, we have this real life community. People send us selfies of themselves wearing Boiler Room merchandise from the most far-flung places they can, and we put it on our website. You know, this is ASAP Rocky wearing a t-shirt that we designed with him for his tour. Boiler Room is a real world brand with a real world community. It's interesting how people watch Boiler Room as well, how they consume it. This was news to us. Like I say, we're learning stuff as we go. We had an independent company conducted some research into our audience. We found out that that's actually Matt, who's going to talk to you in a bit. We actually found out that a large portion of people consuming Boiler Room was people going around to other people's houses and sort of watching it together. And also we know, like, it might be the pre-party thing, or people watching it at home, or it showcasing the after party. Where is it? Do people identify with these? Is this somewhere, would you put it on at a party or that? So no, when you go to that club and you get back home and you put Boiler Room on, that's how you carry on the party. But you know, people actually come together and have like real life experiences around the stuff that we do together. In terms of our evolution and where we're at now, supporting underground scenes and showcasing them from the places where they happen is still the core of our business. From Baltimore bounce music to grime in the UK to Chicago footwork to LA beat scenes, supporting underground scenes is always going to be at the heart of what we do. That said, we now produce a range of different content formats from, you know, not like it used to be that 100% of our business and what we put out into the world was like party shows with an audience hanging around the DJs and performers. Nowadays, that probably accounts for about 50% of what we do. We do low-key sort of radio podcast productions. This is a guy called Laraji who led an hour and a half guided music meditation on Boiler Room, which is one of my favourite things that we've done. I think that's showing my age. But actually sitting there like, you know, no pretense, just this guy sitting there cross-legged on a rug in our office leading people through a guided meditation. We actually filmed live broadcast football games. We have a football tournament of our own called Boiler Room Fives. That started out down in Hackney Downs, just a neighbourhood kick around with a bunch of our friends, artists like Sample was in the team and Jamie X was in one of the teams. Now that's evolved into a big thing. We have this sports tournament, we're travelling around. Also a major new thing for us is doing debate broadcasts, so just tackling issues. Like this was our broadcast about Fabric, shot in room 1 of Fabric with Goldie, artwork. We had like the owners, the guys who run Fabric. We had Emily Thornbury, the MP for Islington, who was fantastic by the way. But you know, it feels like we have this role within music now where we like to think, you know, we have a real relationship with people, we have an active role, we have a voice that needs to be heard. Well, providing a platform for people whose voices need to be heard. So we've done stuff, we do the panel on Black Lives Matter, we've done this panel on Save Fabric, we've got more things coming. I think it's important for us, if we do have this community now, we have this platform to showcase the issues that are important to young people, especially as they relate to music. Finally with this bit, we empower artists to realise their ambitions, like having evolved from being a platform to showcase emerging music scenes and subcultures to now we're in the position where we turn around to artists and we're like, hey, What do you want to do? Let's work on something together. We don't just want to put you into a box. We want to work with you to think what ideas that you've got that we can bring to life. So this is actress, very serious music producer, performing at the Barbican in London with the London Contemporary Orchestra, which was a show, like an original composition they came together to do. We actually got a little bit of funding from the Arts Council to do that, which the partnerships team worked on here. But so we want to work with artists to help them like bring their ideas to life. 'Cause it's difficult for artists as well. Like, you know, you've got your record label, especially with the way because people still aren't really making that much money off making record sales. It's all about touring and like other ways of generating revenue. But if you're an artist who's got creative ideas, it's quite difficult to get backing for these things. So you talk to your record label, unless there's a direct kickback, it's unlikely that it's going to be like, yeah, cool, we'll put on like a show at the Barbican with a full orchestra that costs a pretty significant amount of money. That's why Boiler Room exists, to help people bring those ideas to life. And to round up, like Boiler Room began out of frustration, and frustration is still the thing that drives all of our major changes. I guess after 5 years of hard work with a fantastic team working here, we're in the privileged position where we can look around at what's happening in the music space, think what doesn't exist that we could create, like we did with Boiler Room, or what exists currently that's just a bit rubbish or a bit antiquated or could be updated or done better. That's a critical thing as well. Like we're all music fans really at the end of the day. Like we're not doing this for cynical reasons. We're doing this for the love, and just thinking about what frustrates us and what we could do better. Case in point is Notting Hill Carnival, the biggest black music event in Europe, like the second biggest street carnival in the world. Happens every year. It's just the highlight of the whole summer. What gets reported on in the press? It's that there was like 6 stabbings and like somebody grinding up against a policeman. It's such rubbish. There's more crime per capita at Glastonbury, like any other major festival. Like it's absolutely rubbish. And what we wanted to do, just as fans of Carnival, is go there and showcase it, this amazing special thing, to the world. So we went and like made arrangements with like 8 different sound systems. By the way, there's no like, it was hilarious the process of doing it, there's no like real central governing body that looks after Notting Hill Carnival. It just kind of happens. We were just calling up like old men who are like 70, who've had these sound systems for years, but like, can we do a thing with you? They're like, what is the internet? What is that thing? But so we pulled this off and it was fantastic, and we did that because we were frustrated that nobody was showcasing this amazing positive event in the way that it should be showcased. We did a music festival in New York, well, just outside of New York a few weeks ago with Raven. I said, like, with festivals, right, I bet if I was going to put up, like, 20 different festival posters here, and we're going to cover the name of the festivals, it's quite difficult to tell to tell them apart or guess which festival's which, because they've all got the same lineup, and they're just, like, all, like, just getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and the personal experience is being lost. So we created, like, a different sort of small festival, lots of multiple rooms, all set up towards having, like, intimate broadcast experiences. And finally, virtual reality. This is actually a task that you guys are going to be working on tomorrow. Did everyone, just a show of hands, who's heard about this VR thing that we're doing? Okay, so this is the BBC reporting about it. Now, virtual reality. It's like getting written about in all the magazines and the press that, like, for example, getting one of them VR headsets is this year's like hot new Christmas present, whatever. The fact is, there's just not enough like good VR content to make me want to go and buy these devices, right? It's like, it does pretty well in terms of video gaming. It's just such an obvious sort of medium or like format through which to consume virtual reality. But it's generally agreed that music is the thing that's going to unlock mass scale growth for virtual reality as a category. The problem is it's currently so cost prohibitive for people to produce good virtual reality content within music that it frankly is limited to like Madonna, Bjork or Frank Ocean. Bjork actually did like a really cool video quite recently, but it cost like £250,000 to shoot something in virtual reality. Or the only alternative is like you do like a tour around a gallery, and frankly I'm not trying to like watch a tour, I'll just go to a gallery. Like, it doesn't really add anything, it doesn't really show off the medium in its best way. So we thought enough is enough, and we're actually opening in March next year our own virtual reality venue. What that means is a 300 capacity real life like new music venue in London, but the whole place is going to be surreptitiously rigged up with these virtual reality cameras. That means all of our Boiler Room content shot in London is going to be available in regular old sexy 2D. Let's not forget about 2D, it's still pretty cool. But also in 360 for Facebook, and then full, like 2 weeks after the show has happened, in full like headset immersive VR. But the point is, like, for us, you know, this is all about, like, it's coming out in dribs and drabs, it's a bit all over the place, but I think frustration is such a, like, doing it yourself. This is all us just giving it a go. Like, none of these big companies, like Time Warner, like, nobody's really cracked this yet, so we thought, alright, we'll give it a go, we'll see what we can do. I think just acting out of frustration, actually just giving it a go, and even if you fail, is just one of the most vital things. That's it from me. Now I'm going to hand over to Matt.
Because I'm going to have to make this presentation.